Greetings and welcome back to the Home Slice, my friends. Today we are going to look into the differences between a Victorinox kitchen knife and a Spyderco one. These Victorinox knives, they range around in price. Sometimes you can get them down as low as like $6-7 sometimes, but oftentimes you're probably paying closer to $10 for them. Last I checked, a Spyderco Z-Cut, which is about exactly the same edge length. Oh, the Z-Cut's got another, maybe another 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 inch of edge. Last time I checked, they are more like $25, $26. So a little bit more than twice the price, and they're both really good budget kitchen knife options. Victorinox obviously has their proprietary steel, which has around 13% chrome, and that's about the only detail that they give. I assume it's kind of something like 420 HC or in that kind of ballpark. Spyderco is running Carpenter's CTS BD1N in their Z-Cut knives. And it's a wonderful steel, a real steep flat grind on this guy, although the edge appears to be a little bit thicker. I've put a 17-degree edge on both of these, and the edge on the Z-Cut appears to be about twice as wide, maybe 1.5 millimeters or 2 millimeters, rather than like your 1 sort of millimeter edge that you've got on this Victorinox. Anyway, I've sharpened these both up. I'd like to do a direct comparison on the two with just a handful of different tests. I sharpened them on a Japanese natural waterstone, and I used a method described to me by one of my viewers in which you use slurry on the stone and sharpen it up that way for the first round, and then wash the stone off and gently do the last steps on the stone with no slurry. If you guys have comments about how to use a Japanese natural stone, I'd be more than happy to hear them because I don't really know exactly what I'm doing, but it is fun. Anyway, I was able to get the Victorinox edge just a hair finer, and it was hitting 167 grams best without any stropping. And the Spyderco Z-Cut was hitting in the 188 grams vicinity. That probably doesn't sound great to a lot of you who are expert sharpeners, and indeed it's not the lowest score that I've got. But something I wanted to look into is if you have minimal stropping gear, is there a benefit from going from a slightly higher carbon, nitrogen, steel, and in terms of being able to get it deburred more fully without a lot of stropping. So I wanted to do a direct comparison. Japanese natural stone is also a real common one to be using in the kitchen domain. So it's where the stone is intended to sort of shine, and I just wanted to do some testing on that as well. So I want to get a rough performance snapshot off of each of these. The Spyderco Z-Cut is a little bit thinner, probably closer to around 1 millimeter on the spine, but it also has a grind to a slightly thicker edge. I don't know how that will benefit it or detract from the results, but my guess would be that when we go through the 40 millimeter manila rope, which we'll do one time, that the thinner edge will have a slight advantage, because in rope cut tests, often thinner edges produce less compression and wedging and make the cutting less difficult. But then I'm going to do a couple cardboard box cuts on a banana box. They have this pretty intense cardboard they use for these banana boxes, and we'll do a handful of cuts, maybe 5 cuts down the side with each knife, and I think the higher carbon steel is going to have a little bit of an advantage there, so hopefully that'll balance things out. After that, we'll look at them in the microscope. I'll cut up an orange and an onion to see how the performance is. We'll do a best test at the end to see how the final score is, and a paper slice. I'm not going to cut them to death like I normally do because I've already tested this Victorinox steel with a Japanese natural stone, so I already have a performance metric on this, and I'm not quite to my testing of BD1 yet, and I want to do a bit of an abbreviated video that's maybe slightly more realistic to kitchen circumstances. All right, that's looking a little bit wiry, a little bit wire edge like. I guess it goes, I don't know, I guess it goes to show that unless I am lacking some skill in my bench stone edge preparation, it's quite hard to deburr an edge off of the stone alone. And most edges will benefit from a bit of stropping. Like this one certainly would have, like after seeing the way the edge was kind of a little bent and broken off in places, I wouldn't use this edge in the kitchen. But what's significant is that, I mean, it's under 200 Bess, and so if you're using a Bess machine, you know, you got a landmark somewhere below that if you want to be sure to not leave a wire edge. It's also interesting because the edge felt quite keen and was shaving. I should have demonstrated that. I realize now that I've done this that I should have taken a microscope test to begin with to compare to the other one. So I'm sorry about that lack of foresight there, but I'm going to do another one of these tests with a stropped up dual grit edge and compare the results. And we'll also strop this one after I'm done, and we'll see if the wire edge comes off or if it kind of restores a more stable edge. Anyway, the next thing that I am going to do is cut up an orange and an onion and give you my thoughts. So let's get into that. Push cutting nicely through. Fun part about Spyderco Z-Cut is that you can actually use it as a paring knife and kind of do more slicing motions, kind of like that. But the way that they've designed it, you can also complete a push cut as long as you finish at the correct point, which I didn't. You can also do rolling cuts, which I probably won't show you on this orange, but on the onion I will. You can kind of start with your tip down and roll a little bit. Even though it is a paring knife, you can do those sort of more chef knife-like motions with it. This edge is still feeling like it has a lot of life in it. It's feeling fairly fine, and I guess it's important to note right now that I do all of this research to figure out, well, what leaves a wire edge and what doesn't. And you can leave a very small wire edge. I mean, keep in mind here, we're dealing with a microscope that's 1,000 times, so you see that, and it may look significant, but it's quite close up, like quite close up. And you can still have a very serviceable knife. Sometimes I think we stress out about things that don't really ruin performance overall. They just mess with the lasting edge or the working edge. I'm going to cut this into slices, 4 slices each, because I want to eat some. Also because when you go through the little fibers of an orange, if the knife is still fairly sharp, it will slice through them and you won't have a big puddle of water. If the knife is not very sharp anymore, then you'll tend to have more of a puddle because it will actually burst these little juice-filled fibers of the orange. Cool. I'm going to eat this, and then I'll come back to do the onion. All right, so this is the size of puddle we have left from the Spyderco Z-Cut. If you hold it, there's enough to run a little bit. Not a huge amount though. I'm relatively pleased with that. So even if you have, you know, the level of skill that I have with Japanese natural stones, and you're sharpening without a strop, I would say the edges that you're forming, in my opinion, are like still going to be serviceable, performing everyday edges. This doesn't feel bad. There probably will come a point where the wire edge breaks off if you have a wire edge like I do, and you'll experience a change in performance. This is not the edge that I'm like really like shooting to have, you know? But at the same time, sometimes we can get overly stressed about these things. All right, I'm gonna try to have a non-onion and onion part of the cutting board so that my next orange is actually enjoyable to eat and not onion flavored. With onions, it's important to note, you can sort of feel the difference in your fingertips of whether a knife is sharp by cutting up an onion. It can be really, really nice to use a sharp knife on an onion. However, a lot of YouTubers have demonstrated that you can actually cut up things like an apple or an onion with no edge at all, because the geometry of the knife being thin is kind of what enables you to get through it. So, not the world's best standalone test, but I'll be able to feel some good things, I'm sure. All right, start getting seething. Yeah. So, I'm no fancy chef, but this is how I cut up an onion. Definitely you can hear it crunch, crunch, crunching through rather than slipping through easily. What's cool about these Spyderco Z-Cuts is that you can do like a falling stroke like that. Yeah, that is taking some effort, so there is some edge keenness that has been lost. But man, this thing's been through a hardcore banana box like 5 times with a thin little blade and a 40mm manila rope. I think that's pretty admirable. So that's an example of the rolling cuts that you can get with Spyderco Z-Cut that are much more difficult on an ordinary paring knife. I will say during the rope cut test, it was hard to find a way to hold this thing that really felt safe. You got nothing to put your thumb on up there, and then you're kind of pinch gripping here, but it is quite a flexible blade. I could say in Spyderco's defense that it's never made to cut through a 40mm manila rope, like totally beyond the scope of use. Do a bit more of like a Nakiri chop there. That's nice, like that. Look how thin those are. That's not bad. A little push cut action. I'm not very good at my claw grip. Someday I'll work on that. Maybe I'll make a video about it someday. Oh no, we're getting into orange territory. Okay, I would give that, as far as the orange experience went, I'd give that like a solid 7.5 for the orange experience, probably a 6 for the onion. I should also mention that I'm going to retest both of these knives and repeat this, I think this entire test, with a dual grit edge, and on that one I will endeavor to make sure that I have got microscope shots beforehand, as well as done enough stropping to make sure to remove any wire edge so that we can compare to clean edges, because that is what we all want, isn't it? The beginning reading for this was 188. This has gone through the 40mm manila rope and a bunch of cardboard, and come into contact with that cutting board a few times. And we are presently at what? That's at 393. It's reading almost dull enough that you would need to resharpen it. If there's a catch or two, yeah, like I can feel there's a catch there, right there, just a little one. Doesn't interfere very badly with rope cutting. Feels a little jagged overall. So let's give that 8 strokes on the kangaroo strop and see how the BD1 edge strops back to life, and then we'll head on to our friend, the Victorinox. Okay, 8 strokes on kangaroo leather. Totally smooth again. Very nice. Very nice slice cut. Decent push cut. Not bad, BD1N. Not bad at all. That's a pretty good edge to come back just off of unloaded rue. I guess maybe we should retest it. Now I'm curious. Oh, I didn't write down the 393. Better do that well. $2.99. That jumped 100 grams, so that rue leather likely has taken off quite a lot of that wire edge very quickly. Very cool. All right, I'm going to get set up again for the Victorinox. All right. Those both were a little difficult to get through the rope. It's not really a kind of jagged, coarse edge that's optimized for cutting fibers. It's more of a kitchen-y edge. The thin edge of the Victorinox did make things a little bit easier to get through, but let's take a look at the microscope and see what we've got going on. All right, looks like a little bit less edge bending going on there. I did see some reflections from the edge that looked a tiny bit bent, but the best score that it came to was better. So perhaps it initially deburred better, or perhaps with the softer steel, it actually stripped off that burr a little bit more, stripped off that wire edge a little bit more on the cardboard. Anyway, this test is, I guess, a little bit funny. I'm gonna run through and finish it, but it is interesting data to me. Like if you're just using a stone, looking for, you know, a fine edge with some aggression still to it, what that edge might potentially look like and feel like, and you know, maybe sometimes we're using slightly burred edges that still perform just fine for certain things, which, you know, is interesting. All right, orange first. I'm going to go to the side of that so we can see what size of puddle it makes. I'm assuming this will be a little bit nicer than the experience with the Z-Cut, just because of that lack of burr. I don't know that means that, like, the steel is better in some sense. I guess the test mainly reveals that, you know, sometimes you if you're experimenting with a new stone or something, then you may be, you know, leaving extra burr, or certain steels may be more prone to that. You know, actually, it's funny, but that actually feels a little bit more difficult than the... Oh, that one was okay. Interesting. It doesn't feel easier than the Z-Cut on the peeling step. It feels about equal. Okay, I would say actually the tip feels nicer. I think the design of this one, when I was going through the rope, I used this section a bit more. But I would say the middle doesn't feel as nice as the Z-Cut. So I guess more of the knife being affected by wear slightly, it seems. Okay, well, There's the two puddles side by side. This one also has enough juice to run. This seemed fairly similar. This one's had some time to soak in. Maybe just a tad less on the Victorinox. Maybe. It's hard to say. I think they're pretty similar. Let's go through the onion. I'm not going to do alternative styles of slicing on this because it's not built like the Spyderco Z-Cut to be able to do those kind of cool things. Probably there's other cool ways to cut an onion with a simple paring knife, but I don't know them. I think that I would say that overall, the onion experience feels slightly better on the Victorinox. And although you can't do as many cool different forms of chopping, like that forward chop worked really well with the Spyderco Z-Cut. But I think in terms of how the edge feels, this edge, not as nice in the middle, but overall it feels like it retained its fineness a little bit better. I think if we're taking the whole edge into account, I would say it seems like the Spyderco Z-Cut held on to more of that aggression you need to get through the orange, and this one has held on to more of the fineness you need to get through an onion. So just a little bit different. High carbon maybe holds the aggression where lower carbon tends to not have that fine point develop into a wire edge perhaps. All right, let's get the best machine. I'm going to clean this up. All right, in keeping of my previous scoring of 1 to 10, I would give this Victorinox a 6.5, so 1 point less on the orange, just because that part in the middle of the knife, the middle of the belly, was hanging up a little bit more. It was a little bit more difficult to slice through the orange with. And I'd give it a 7 on the onions, which is one more, which kind of puts them at a tie. Let's check what the best score is. Best reading, I should say. Oh, very interesting. Interesting, right here in the middle. Wow, that's way higher. Wow. 749. That is really odd. I mean, I could feel that that middle section was a little bit harder to use, but 749 is huge. We must have hit a microchip or something. That's crazy. Okay, let's do that again and make sure that we slightly offset from that area we just tested. All right, so let's go a little bit further out to the tip, but still in that cut zone on the edge of where it was feeling dull. $5.51. Man, that middle section is dead. Like, she's really dead. Interesting. That is so interesting. Let me get a piece of paper. That is so interesting. Strange. Oh yeah, okay, there's a spot. There's a dead spot. You can get past it, but there are little catches coming out. I did not anticipate that. So, wow. Overall, the edge is much keener. Like if you just do the tip here, like that's push cutting, I think, still without stropping. Yeah, relatively well. Down at the base. No, not really. Smooth slicing though. In the middle, it's a bit murdered. It's just a few spots. Yeah, right there. Wow, what in the world? That is so crazy. Let's give this a strop and see how it comes back on the best and on the paper. I did not anticipate that result. Okay. I accidentally spaced out and did 10 strokes, so I've done a little bit more on this. There's still one spot that's not great, but overall that slicing super smooth, super happy with that. And you gotta figure Victorinox with these softer steels, one of the benefits you're definitely getting is that ability to just strop back like nobody's business. I thought there was a spot, but these quick strokes were really missing it. It's not bad anymore. There was a spot right out there. It's really not bad anymore. I can't even find it now, to be honest. Interesting. I didn't want to start that cut, but pretty good. Pretty good overall. Let's I'll give it one quick aligning stroke just to be fair, because I did that with BD1N, and clean it off. And let's see where the best is sitting now, in that area that was up around the 700 mark. Surprise. Now you got to take it all with a grain of salt, because I left a wire edge on this. It was really an experiment in sharpening more than like a serious comparison of one knife product against the other. 659. Okay, what shall we say to that? What shall we say? Well, I think if you don't have a strop, okay? If you don't have a strop and you're like an intermediate to mid-high skill sharpener like myself with hand sharpening, I think that I would say it's definitely worth it. It's definitely worth it to spend the extra, 15, 16 bucks on a Spyderco Z-Cut and just to give it a try. For one, the different grip positions or the different sort of methods of slicing, chopping, push cutting that it opens up are pretty fun in and of itself. Also, apparently, if you're sharpening without stropping, or you're using a Japanese natural stone and you're just getting into it, it will yield a much more permanent and fine edge in certain tasks. Again, I keep saying, but you gotta take that with a bit of a grain of salt, because it's not a comparison of two cleaned up edges. So I'm going to do my due diligence now, having this info, which I think is valid data. Like, I enjoy getting this. It helps me wrap my mind a little bit more around the conundrum that at times sharpening can be. But I'm going to do my due diligence when I sharpen these both with a dual grit edge to do the full amount of stropping strokes and make sure that those edges are cleaned up as much as is humanly possible. And we'll perform this test again, and we'll see if the results reverse. We'll see if the results hold steady, or if dual grit completely changes the makeup of the test. Anyway, I hope you had a great time watching the video today. If you want to see the last test that I did of a Victorinox knife in my manila rope testing, I'll put that on screen now. For the rest of you, I'll say peace out from the home slice. You guys have a great day. Bye.